Hi, I'm Rowena. At 17, I came home from work to find the house empty. Keys gone, rooms cleared, just one trash bag on the porch with my clothes, and a note taped to the door. Figure it out. No goodbye, no warning, just silence that stretched for 12 years. Now they've come back, crying, desperate, asking for help. And me? I didn't yell. I just handed them a note of my own. 4 words. And they couldn't say a single thing back. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from? And have you ever been left behind by your own family? I remember the exact moment I knew something was off. It wasn't a scream, a crash, or some big dramatic clue. It was the quiet. That morning, the house was too quiet. Usually by 6:45 a.m. there would be some kind of movement, Oren stomping down the stairs in those heavy boots of his, or Cressida pacing around the kitchen on her 4th outfit change. But that day, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, not even the scent of toast or burnt coffee lingering in the air. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, walked down the hallway in my socks, and peeked into the kitchen. Empty. No dirty dishes, no breakfast waiting on the counter, just spotless countertops and a silence that felt staged. I hesitated. For the past few months, I'd started to feel like the air around me changed when I walked into a room, like I was interrupting a conversation I was never meant to hear. I told myself I was being dramatic, but deep down I knew things had shifted, like I was no longer one of them. Still, I grabbed my backpack and headed for the door. School didn't care if you felt like an outsider, but as I opened it, ready to walk into the cold, gray March morning, I froze. There was a single black trash bag sitting on the porch, not beside the trash bin, not near the curb, right on the welcome mat. At first I thought maybe someone had left it there by mistake, but then I saw the note on top, folded neatly. My name wasn't even on it. Just 2 words, scribbled in my mom's handwriting. Figure it out. I dropped my bag and tore open the trash bag, hands shaking. My clothes were inside, badly folded, some still damp. A few notebooks, my toothbrush, the charger I always had to remind Oren not to steal. And at the bottom, wedged between a pair of socks, was something metal. I didn't look at it yet. Not then. I ran back into the house, or tried to. But the door wasn't locked. It was deadbolted from the inside. I pounded on it, screaming their names. Mom? Oren? Cressida? Nothing. When I finally got the lock to slide open, I stepped into a hollowed-out version of the place I grew up in. Every room was stripped. The family photo wall in the living room, gone. The shelf where we used to keep birthday cards and baby books, bare. My mother's ugly ceramic rooster that she swore was heritage, not a feather in sight. Their bedrooms were empty too. No sheets, no mess, just clean carpets and that eerie, sanitized smell. I grabbed my phone. No texts, no missed calls. I called Mom. Number no longer in service. I tried Oren. Voicemail. Cressida's line rang twice, then silence. That's when my knees buckled. Right there in the hallway, next to where the coat rack used to be, the bag sat outside like a sick joke, like they didn't even care enough to pretend this wasn't deliberate. I left the house. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. That whole day is a blur now. I wandered the streets of our town, holding the trash bag like some lost traveler. I tried calling relatives, my aunt in Cincinnati, a cousin in Toledo, but no one answered. Or maybe they knew. Maybe they'd been told not to. Around 9 p.m., I found myself standing in front of the public library. It was warm inside, and the security guard looked tired enough not to ask questions. I found a single-stall restroom in the back corner, locked the door and sat down on the tiled floor. I didn't sleep. I just sat there with my arms around my knees, eyes wide open. At some point in the early morning, I pulled the trash bag closer and started digging through it again. That's when I found it, the metal thing. It was a keychain, silver, scratched in places. A tiny house about the size of my thumb. I remembered it instantly. I was 6 when my mom gave it to me. So, you'll always remember where home is, she'd said. I used to keep it on my school pencil case until I was 12. It was the only thing that didn't belong with the rest. Everything else was tossed in like garbage. But this? This felt placed, like a message, like a memory they hadn't managed to throw away. The next morning, I woke up, if you could call it that, to a knock on the restroom door. It was a librarian, an older woman with kind eyes and a soft voice. She didn't ask what I was doing there. She just handed me a granola bar and said, "Honey, the world looks better after breakfast." I didn't cry until after she left. And I sat there, chewing in silence, staring at the floor, my body still cold from the night. And quietly, so quietly I barely heard it myself, I whispered, "So this is what starting alone looks like." And as I sat on the curb outside that building, clutching that keychain in my palm like it meant something, like it still had a purpose, I realized they didn't just leave me, they erased me. I didn't move for a long time. The keychain lay in my palm, its tiny silver house catching the light like it still meant something. It didn't. Or maybe it did. I couldn't tell anymore. I just knew that if I stayed there on the curb any longer, someone would eventually come out and ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. So I stood up, shoved the keychain deep into my coat pocket, and walked. I didn't have a plan, just a bag, 2 pairs of socks, 1 change of clothes, and no one to call. That first night, I wandered past closed shops and shuttered homes, pretending the cold didn't bite through my sleeves. Downtown Akron was quieter than I remembered, or maybe it just felt that way without anyone beside me. I ended up near the back of a mechanic shop, one of those run-down garages where broken cars sat for months collecting rust. That's when I saw it. An old RV tilted slightly to one side, one of the back windows cracked open like it had given up resisting the wind. I hesitated, but when the temperature dropped and my hands started shaking so badly I couldn't unzip my own backpack, I climbed in. Inside, it smelled like grease and mildew. The floor creaked, and the mattress was stained, half collapsed like someone had slept too long on one side, and then never returned. Still, it had walls. And for now, that was enough. Over the next few days, I made it mine. I pulled some rags and torn towels out of a laundromat dumpster nearby, wiped down the windows, swept out old leaves, and stuffed a pair of socks under the window gap to keep out the wind. It wasn't home, but it was shelter. I kept going to school like nothing had changed, wore donated clothes from a local church's pantry, mostly oversized sweaters and jeans that didn't quite fit. I told my classmates I was staying with a cousin for a bit. No one questioned it. No one really asked much about me before either. At night, I worked. A diner 3 blocks down had a dishwasher quit mid-shift. I offered to help, told the manager I didn't need to be on payroll, just needed cash. He looked at me a little too long before handing me gloves and pointing to the back. I worked 5 nights a week, sometimes more when the guy on fries needed a break. I scrubbed until my hands cracked and smelled like soap and meat grease. I pocketed just enough to buy peanut butter, instant noodles, and after 2 weeks, a burner phone. I turned it on every morning, praying there'd be a message. Nothing, no call, no text. No, "Are you okay?" Not even a wrong number. The silence pressed down harder than the snow. One night after a shift, I leaned against the brick wall behind the diner, too tired to walk back to the RV right away. I must have dozed off. I woke to a light blanket being tucked over my legs. "You don't gotta explain," the fry cook, Marcus, said. "Just, it gets cold. That's all." He walked off before I could say thank you. Weeks passed. I got used to counting days by the stacks of clean plates and how many packets of salt I could take without anyone noticing, but something started gnawing at me. If they'd left me, had they done it legally? I didn't know how laws worked, but I remembered the way Mom once muttered about paperwork when she changed our address. So one morning, after school, I took a bus to the county courthouse. It took hours bouncing from desk to desk until someone finally pulled up a record. The woman behind the glass scanned the file and glanced at me, eyebrows rising. "Says here you're legally emancipated," she said slowly. "Filed 2 months ago by Cynthia Miles. Your mother?" I nodded, numb. Means you're no longer her legal responsibility, she added. You're listed as an independent minor. You can sign leases, open accounts, things like that. I swallowed hard. So she filed to get rid of me? The woman didn't answer. She just slid the paper across the counter. I walked out without remembering how I got down the stairs. It wasn't just abandonment. It was strategy, a clean break. I wasn't a runaway. I'd been removed, by choice. That night, I sat in the RV staring at the burner phone again. This time, I didn't hope it would ring. I just turned it off. My birthday came and went without a flicker. No calls, no cake. I walked past a diner window where a little girl sat in a party hat, clapping as someone brought out a sundae with a sparkler on top. I didn't cry. I just stood there, my breath fogging the glass. Inside, the waitress caught my eye, gave a small nod, and disappeared behind the counter. A minute later, she came out the door with a paper napkin and a chocolate chip cookie. "Here," she said, pressing it into my palm. "You look like someone who needs to blow something out." There was a single birthday candle sticking out the side. I lit it when I got back to the RV and didn't make a wish. I just watched the wax melt into the cookie and let it flicker until the flame disappeared. I told myself that would be the end of it. But curiosity is stubborn, and pain likes answers. The following week, I went back to the courthouse. I asked for property records under our old address. The clerk was bored, probably thought I was looking up a tax lien or something. But when the papers printed, my hands went cold. The house hadn't been in Mom or Dad's name for 3 months before they left. It had been sold, signed over under my brother Oren's name. The buyers? A man named Gerald Voss. I knew that name. He was Dad's co-worker. I'd met him once when he stopped by to borrow a hedge trimmer. They didn't just walk away. They planned every inch of it. Transferred the property, dropped me off in a legal crack, and vanished into thin air. Not by accident, not in the heat of a fight. On purpose. That's when I made myself a promise. If they ever showed up again, I wouldn't say a word. I'd let the silence answer for me. I stopped looking out the RV window that night. For the first time since they left me, I didn't wonder if they'd call or come back. Something colder than the March air settled in my chest. Resolve. The next morning, after my shift washing dishes ended and the sun was barely warming the cracked sidewalks of downtown Akron, I headed straight to the county assessor's office. My sneakers were still damp from stepping through slush behind the diner, but I didn't care. I needed answers, and I knew where to start. The building smelled like printer toner and floor wax. The clerk behind the records desk looked at me like I didn't belong, young, tired, with dirt under my fingernails from scrubbing plates all night. But I stood tall and asked, "I need to look up a property deed. 214 Roselawn Avenue, from about 6 months ago." He hesitated, then handed me a clipboard and said, "Fill this out. ID?" "I don't have one yet," I replied. "But the house used to belong to my family." His expression softened just enough to let me through. He returned 15 minutes later with a printed record and a raised eyebrow. "Looks like it sold for $112,000, he said. "That's about 80 grand below average in that zip code. Someone got a deal." My stomach tightened. I scanned the paper. The buyer's name, Daniel Thomason. I remembered him, Dad's co-worker from the factory. Used to come around for poker nights and backyard barbecues. I flipped to the second page. That's when it hit me. Under previous owners, my name was missing. But I remembered signing papers when I was 14, when Dad told me it was for insurance stuff. Something about college planning. I never asked again, and now I was erased. "Do you keep copies of beneficiary removal forms?" I asked, trying to sound like I belonged in a place like that. He pointed me to a public terminal in the corner. "Search the docket archives. If it's notarized and filed, it'll be there." An hour later, my hands were shaking. There it was. A scanned form dated almost 2 years ago. Signature, Rowena C. Hartley. But I never signed that. I stared at it. The fake loop of the R, the neatness I never had. Whoever wrote it didn't even try to match my messy cursive. And underneath, in small print, notarized by Celeste Green. I printed everything. Slid it all into a used manila folder I pulled from the bin near the exit. My hands were cold, but my mind was hot. I walked out into the noon sun with a copy of my own disappearance in my hands. Later that night, I sat in my RV, hunched over the tiny counter near the cracked window. I made a list on the back of a napkin. Dates, names, signatures, filing numbers, and then I wrote one name in all caps, Micah. My brother's name had been all over those papers, on the housing transition request, on the tax adjustment form, even on the maintenance escrow, which listed him as the transitional occupant. I'd believed he was just tagging along when they left. I thought maybe he didn't know. But now I knew better. He didn't just know. He helped make it happen. That night, I folded the napkin neatly and slipped it into my journal, right between pages that used to have doodles of our backyard and scribbles from boring high school lectures. By morning, I was back at school. Tired, eyes red, but there. I sat through classes like a ghost. No one asked where I lived now, and I didn't offer. They all still thought I was staying with a cousin who traveled a lot. But then came Ms. Galloway's class, Intro to Business Law. She was sharp, maybe in her 50s, with silver strands through her ponytail and a look in her eye like she'd seen too much and still had fight in her. That day, we were discussing ownership fraud. She paced at the front of the classroom, talking about forged documents and beneficiary removals. My hand shot up before I even realized it. What if the signature was forged, and the notary didn't verify the signer properly? I asked. She stopped, looked at me. Then it's fraud, she said. And if you can prove it, you might have grounds for civil remedy, or even criminal investigation. Why? I just nodded. Just curious. After class, she pulled me aside. You've got a sharp eye. Ever think of going further in this field? I shrugged. I just want to know how to defend what's mine. She gave me her office hours and said, come see me, anytime. That evening, after I got off work and stopped by the 24-hour laundry to grab some clean clothes from the church donation box, I returned to the RV and started tidying. That's when I saw it, an envelope, stuck deep under the driver's seat, bent and smudged, but still sealed. I almost didn't open it. My hands trembled as I peeled it back. Inside was a letter, handwritten, dated just 3 weeks before they left me. Rowena, if they leave you, don't believe it was your fault. You were always the best of them. You loved quietly. You listened. You made people feel seen. They don't deserve that. But you do. Love always. Grandma Tears blurred the words. My breath caught. No one ever told me she died. Not a call. Not a text, not even a cheap sympathy card. I sat in the dim glow of the RV for a long time, letter in hand, wondering if she tried to warn me, if maybe, just maybe, she knew what was coming and had tried to soften the blow. And then came the final twist. I returned to the notary office that next week, found Celeste Green listed under a tiny mobile tax and document service near an old Dollar General. When I asked her about the paperwork, she furrowed her brow. I remember your mother, she said slowly. She came in alone, said you had run away. I didn't know any different. Did she seem upset? I asked. She shook her head. No, that's what stuck with me. She wasn't grieving. She looked relieved. I left that office numb. My mother hadn't let me go. She wanted me gone. That night, I stopped waiting for them to come back. And I started planning what I'd do if they ever did. I didn't think about them for a long time. Not actively, at least. Their faces would float through the edges of my memory on quiet nights, like smoke slipping under a door I never opened. I built a life in Oregon. A small life, maybe, but mine. I got up, showed up, paid off the house I bought with no help, and worked my way up to legal compliance at a mid-sized firm where people actually listened when I spoke. 12 years had passed. It was late November. Rain tapped a steady rhythm on the windows of my little blue house just outside Eugene. I had just finished reheating leftover soup and was setting a tea bag into a chipped mug when someone knocked. Not a quick knock. A slow, almost uncertain rhythm. I hesitated. Most folks text before stopping by, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I stepped to the door, looked through the peephole, and time split open. There they stood, my mother, Micah, and Micah's wife, Tessa. They looked smaller, weathered, all three soaked, jackets clinging to them like regret. "Rowena," my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't know who else to call. We need your help." I didn't speak. I just opened the door wider, turned my back, and walked inside. If they wanted shelter, fine. They'd find it in silence. I set the mug down and motioned to the living room. They shuffled in, dripping onto the rug I'd bought with my bonus last year. I grabbed a few towels, handed them out without a word, and returned to the kitchen. Micah tried to break the silence. "You look well," he said, voice tight with nerves. I sat down across from them, waiting, letting them squirm. Micah finally exhaled. "Things have gone bad. The business collapsed. Tessa's job didn't last. Mom lost her retirement fund in a real estate scam down in Arizona." He glanced at her, but she stared at her lap. "We're losing the house," he added, rubbing his forehead. "And we thought maybe if you could just help us get back on our feet," Tessa cut in. "Short term, you've always been resourceful." I still hadn't said a word. "Family helps family," Micah said, trying to smile. "Right?" Their voices began to blur, not from volume, but from the memories rising behind them. I saw the trash bags on the porch, felt the sting of cold vinyl under my back in that RV in Idaho, heard the silence of the phone that never rang on graduation day, the words, "We're busy," when I asked for a ride to my first job interview. The way Micah smirked when I passed by his new SUV with my backpack and worn shoes. I saw it all, but I didn't show it. I just sat still, letting their story unravel like an old sweater, threadbare and pitiful. Then Mom sniffled. Her eyes looked red but not swollen. "We didn't think you'd make it," she murmured. "You were always soft." That word landed like a stone on glass. I stood, walked calmly to the desk in the corner, opened the top drawer, pulled out a folded piece of paper I'd kept all these years. I walked back, placed it gently on the coffee table in front of her. She blinked, picked it up with trembling hands, unfolded it. 4 words. That's all. "You figured it out." She gasped, covered her mouth. Micah leaned forward, confused. "What is that?" She didn't answer, just stared at the page like it had grown teeth, because she knew exactly what it was. 12 years ago, when they left me behind, there'd been a note taped to the front door. Sloppy handwriting, a torn edge, no goodbye, no explanation, just figure it out. It had taken me years to understand it wasn't a dare, it was a dismissal. Now I was giving it back. Not in anger, not in revenge, in proof. The walls around us held my framed degree, the title deed to the house in my name, my own life, built with no favors, no shortcuts, no handouts. Mom looked up at me, her eyes searching for something, regret maybe, or a second chance, but I had no words left for them. Micah started to stand, maybe to plead, maybe to argue, but I already had the next letter waiting in my drawer. Micah stood, mouth parting like he had something to say, but I was already walking toward the back hallway. I didn't look at him, didn't have to. The filing cabinet sat beneath the window in my home office. The rain had slowed, just a drizzle now tapping the glass as I slid open the drawer and reached to the very back. There it was, an envelope I'd sealed 3 weeks ago. I returned to the living room where my mother sat hunched over her tea, barely breathing, and Micah lingered near the door like he couldn't decide whether to stay or bolt. His wife hovered at his elbow, eyes darting between us like she was bracing for a punch. I handed the envelope to Micah. "For you." He blinked at it, then glanced at me. "What is this?" "Open it." He hesitated, then peeled back the flap with shaking fingers. I watched his shoulders stiffen as he read. The blood drained from his face so fast I almost thought he'd faint. "A cease and desist?" he muttered. "What, fraud? Under your name?" I didn't blink. "Yes." He looked up, pale and blinking hard. "Rowena, what is this?" I finally spoke. You remember Grandma's will? He swallowed. The one where she left something for everyone? She left me a college fund, small, but enough. It was protected, until someone used Dad's power of attorney to access it, after he died. I let the words land. You thought no one would notice. But I did. Micah opened his mouth, but I lifted my hand slightly and kept going. You used my social security number to apply for 3 separate lines of credit. One of them linked back to a furniture purchase in your name. After you and Camille moved into the house in Spokane, the paper trail isn't fuzzy. I stepped closer. And I filed with the DA's office last month. Everything in that envelope is already in their hands. He backed up like the document might burn him. Wait, Ro, we didn't know. We thought you didn't want it. You never said anything. You never called. I tilted my head slightly. I was 17, living out of an RV. You moved 3 states away. No phone call, no address, but you took the money. His wife's voice cracked. You're blowing this way out of... I turned to her. Do you want me to pull your name from the billing address on the 4th card, or should I assume you didn't know either? Her mouth closed. I looked back to Micah. You always counted on me staying quiet. I was the kid who didn't yell, didn't make scenes, but you should have realized that silence doesn't mean I'm not watching. My mother placed her tea gently on the table, trembling. Rowie, please, we didn't think you'd survive. You were always soft. I didn't flinch. I walked to the bookshelf, pulled open the middle drawer, and retrieved a second envelope, this one older, creased, yellowing at the fold. I stepped forward and laid it flat in front of her. She reached for it hesitantly, recognizing the paper before she even opened it. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. 4 faded words stared back up at her. Figure it out. Her lips parted. That was... The note you left me when you kicked me out. I kept it. I let the silence hang, thick and immovable. Then I said, clearly, you figured it out. The same words, only this time, I wasn't the one left standing in the cold. I rebuilt everything without you. I earned my degree working nights. I paid off this house before I turned 28. I dropped your last name 5 years ago. You didn't notice? Good. My voice didn't rise. If anything, it grew calmer with each sentence. I rebuilt it all, quietly, and now you're here. Why? Because you need me. But everything about my life has been designed to make sure I never need you again. Micah looked stunned. Wait, you changed your name? I'm Rowena Lark now, just Lark. And that cease and desist? That's not a warning. That's part of a case already opened. His voice cracked. You called the authorities? Are you serious? I've been serious since the moment I realized the only justice I was ever going to get was the one I made for myself. He dropped the envelope onto the table like it stung his fingers. You're going to ruin my life. I smiled faintly. No, you already did that. My mother gasped. Her hands trembled as she reached for the edge of the couch. But we came to you in good faith, she whispered. No, I said, finally walking over to the mantel where my diploma hung next to the framed article from the Oregon Law Review. You came here in desperation. You only knocked when the doors everywhere else were shut. This wasn't an act of humility. It was convenience. I turned. Micah's lips parted again, maybe to beg, maybe to lash out. But I wasn't done. Micah made it to the doorframe, but froze when he heard the click of metal behind him. It wasn't a threat, just the quiet sound of a fireproof lockbox being opened on the kitchen counter. I didn't rush. I wanted him to feel it, every second of the silence he'd forced me to live in. The hush that followed every lie, every omission, every check cashed in my name. I walked back into the dining room with the small black lockbox cradled in my hands, then set it down between the leftover casserole and the cold teacups. The box had traveled with me through every apartment, across state lines, under beds, inside closets. I'd memorized the weight of it, the edges, the number of scratches on the lid. because it carried the last voice that ever truly believed in me. Without a word, I took out 2 sealed envelopes and placed one in front of Micah, the other in front of our mother. "This," I said softly, "is the real will, dated exactly 2 weeks before Grandma passed." Micah blinked. "What?" "You told everyone it didn't exist," I continued, now locking eyes with my mother. "You told me she never wrote one, that it got lost. But it didn't. You just hoped I wouldn't find it." She reached for the envelope slowly, her hands trembling as if it burned to touch. Micah stayed frozen, almost afraid to breathe. The room was silent except for the soft tear of paper and the unfolding of old, cream-colored pages. I watched my mother's expression change. Her brows twitched, her lips parted. She stopped at the last line, then read it again, and again. Micah snatched the will from her, scanned it, then slammed his palm on the table. "This is fake," he shouted. "She had dementia. That handwriting, it's not even close to her old style." "Actually," I replied, reaching into the folder I had brought earlier, "this is her doctor's affidavit, signed and dated, declaring she was of sound mind and body. I filed it with the probate office last month." I laid the paper beside the will, just inches from his shaking hand. "In fact," I added, "the same doctor that signed off on your last attempt to declare her incompetent also wrote this. Turns out they didn't appreciate the forgery either." Micah stood abruptly, the chair legs shrieking against the floor. "You knew," I turned to my mother. "You knew this whole time. You were the witness on the first draft. Your signature's right here." She said nothing, but her silence cracked louder than any denial. "You lied," I said plainly. "She left me the house, her savings, the jewelry she promised I'd wear to my wedding, all of it. And why?" I took a breath and read the last line aloud. "Because she is the only one who never asked me for anything." Micah lunged for the page again. "This isn't over. You don't get to rewrite everything." "You already tried to rewrite me," I replied, voice calm. "Years ago." I pulled out one last folder, labeled neatly in plastic, scanned transcripts, copies, records. "You moved to another state right after Dad died," I continued. "You took power of attorney and Grandma's banking access. You sold her car. You transferred the deed, and you listed me as a non-contact dependent in every legal record tied to her." He opened his mouth, but I stopped him with one word. "Why?" He didn't answer. Of course he didn't. "You took advantage of the fact that I was 17 and alone. You left no forwarding address. You made sure I couldn't be found, couldn't be called. And when people asked about me, you told them I was just a distant cousin." Micah paled. "I know," I added, "because I have the audio." From my coat pocket, I pulled out my phone, found the file, hit play. The sound was scratchy at first, but then came Micah's voice. Younger, arrogant, dismissive. "We were just helping her out. She's not really family. Some cousin, I think. Not our responsibility." My mother's face crumpled. "That was the call I made to Child Protective Services," I said, eyes fixed on her. "I was sleeping in a car, and you were telling strangers I didn't exist." Silence filled the room like water rising in a locked car, suffocating, thick, irrefutable. Then I took a step forward, lowering my voice. "But someone did believe I existed." I reached into the box one final time and pulled out a small note, handwritten in blue ink, edges yellowed. "Mr. Lewiston," I said, "the neighbor who always gave Grandma her mail, the one who used to bring her the paper every morning?" My mother nodded, faint recognition crossing her face. "He was a retired estate lawyer. Quiet man, didn't like what he saw. He's the one who notarized her final will. He's the one who mailed me a copy. He even wrote a letter, told me to keep it safe." Micah stared at me like he'd never seen me before. "And this month?" I added. "He's the one who filed the probate claim, on my behalf, while you were busy planning how to gut her house for auction." I looked around the table, the room, the people who had erased me until they needed something. "I rebuilt everything," I said, steady now, "without your name, without your help, without a single call back. And now, this will? This is just the part where the truth catches up. Micah looked down at the envelope in his hands. His fingers trembled. I leaned in, just enough for him to hear. "You stole my name. I just took it back." Micah's fingers twitched around the envelope, knuckles pale. The room stayed silent, like it was holding its breath. I let that stillness hang a few seconds longer before I turned to my mother. "You didn't just leave me," I said quietly. "You erased me." Her eyes flicked up, and for a second, just one, there was a flicker of something human. Then her mouth pressed into that familiar, tight line. "I don't know what you think you found, Rowena, but—" I stepped forward and laid down a thin stack of printed forms on the coffee table. "These are official filings from when you moved. Here, this one. This is where you marked me as voluntarily surrendered. You told the state I had no known relatives, no claim to any assets. You listed me as a ward of no one." Her face froze. "And this one," I continued, tapping the next page, "is where you marked me as unreachable. Even when you knew exactly where I was, you cut me out of the system, legally invisible." The air shifted. "I couldn't even apply for financial aid," I said. "No ID, no family records. When I turned 18, I went to get a copy of my birth certificate, and they told me I didn't exist. That's what you did." Mom looked at Micah, but he said nothing. His eyes had gone glossy. "You think I haven't tried to make peace with that?" I asked. "You think I haven't wondered for years if maybe I did do something to deserve it?" I took a breath, steadying my voice. "But this was premeditated, legal, calculated. You didn't just abandon me, you tried to erase me from your history." There wasn't a sound in the room except for the small creak of the neighbor's rocking chair. "Which is why," I said, pulling out one more document, "I filed to reverse it all." I heard Romy scoff in the corner. "Reverse what? You think some piece of paper will undo 20 years? "No," I said calmly, "but the courthouse might." I laid down the court notice, stamped and sealed. "Next Thursday, 9:30 a.m., I've filed a petition to overturn the fraudulent declarations, restore my legal identity, and pursue restitution. The judge has already reviewed the initial evidence and deemed it worthy of hearing, and I've invited a few witnesses." Micah let out a short, dry laugh. "You can't prove we lied." I smiled. "I don't have to. You already did." He tilted his head, confused, until I pulled out the tablet. I tapped the screen. The living room lights dimmed slightly as I mirrored the video onto the mounted TV. It took a second to load. Then the screen came alive. The first clip was from the cloud archives, stored under an old username, one I'd traced through a long paper trail, and 2 forgotten email recoveries. On the screen, a teenage version of me stood in front of our old house. I was crying, trying to talk to my mother. She walked past me, loading boxes into the back of a U-Haul. She never even turned around. The room was dead silent. Then the next clip played. Micah, early 20s, smug, stood in the garage holding my old Social Security card. He looked right into the home security camera and muttered, "She's gone. Finally." Then tore it in half. Mom's face paled. "This footage was on the cloud," I said, voice even. "You didn't wipe it, you just left it." An hour later, I was at the town hall with neighbors trickling in, some from the HOA, others from church. I hadn't sent a mass invite, just quiet notes to those who'd asked me over the years what really happened. The projector was already set up. I hit play and stood at the back as the footage rolled, scene by scene, no narration, no edits. By the time the third clip faded out, no one was speaking. One of the older women, Mrs. Reed, put her hand over her mouth. "My lord," she whispered, "all these years, we thought you were unstable." "And they let us believe it," said a man near her, shaking his head. "They never said a word." Someone else asked, "Why would a mother do that to her own daughter?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Romy had already tried to get ahead of it online. I'd seen the posts, sappy apologies, half-truths, claims that I was lying for money, but I had receipts, scans, timelines, audio files. I'd posted everything, not for attention, but for clarity. I spoke simply, without theatrics, and let the facts speak. And the comments had poured in. Shame on them. You're not alone. My family did the same. Thank you for showing us we're not crazy. I sat in my car outside the church that night, scrolling in silence, until I got a call from Mr. Kessler, the retired neighbor. I thought you should know, he said, his voice warm and steady. I found something else. It was tucked inside a photo album I'd taken from your grandparents' attic when the house was cleared out. I sat up. What is it? A second will. From your grandfather. He let the weight of it sink in. And just like your grandmother's, he added, it names you as the sole beneficiary. There's even a notarized summary copy. I'd forgotten I'd kept one, but, well, something told me it might matter one day. I closed my eyes. Do you still have it? I'll bring it by in the morning. The next day, I laid both wills, my grandmother's and my grandfather's, side by side on the attorney's desk. My lawyer, Cassandra, studied every page with sharp, practiced eyes. This, she said, tapping the signature, changes everything. 2 separate wills, 2 clear names, both notarized, both excluded from probate by manipulation. She leaned over, lowered her voice. They're going to offer a settlement. What do you want to do? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I smoothed the front of my coat, stood, and walked to the window of the courthouse hallway. Below, I could see the press lining up by the steps. A woman held a sign that read, "We believe Rowena." I didn't know her name, but her presence said enough. My lawyer joined me a moment later. They're offering 18%, only if you agree to seal the case and drop all future claims. I turned toward him slowly. Tell them thank you, and tell them I'd rather lose everything than pretend their lie was ever true. He gave a small nod, then walked back into the courtroom. Micah was pretending to read through his papers, but his hands trembled. Romy sat stiffly beside him, lips pressed so tight they'd nearly vanished. Neither one of them looked in my direction. When the judge returned, the room shifted into a slow silence. Everyone sat a little straighter. Ms. Rowena Marin, the judge began, please confirm you do not wish to accept the settlement offered by the estate. I stood. That's correct, Your Honor. And you understand the risks? Yes, I said clearly, but I also understand the cost of silence. A ripple of murmurs stirred the gallery. The judge banged the gavel once gently. Then let's proceed. My attorney began by laying out the chain of evidence, slowly, methodically. First, the documentation proving my birth certificate had been altered. Then came the footage. Grainy clips showing me sobbing on the porch as my mother packed the car, eyes cold as she turned away. The tape where Micah tore my Social Security card in half, whispering, "She's gone. Finally." Each moment landed like a stone dropped in still water. Their lawyer cleared his throat and shifted nervously. Micah leaned over and muttered something to Romy. She hissed back under her breath, "She was never stable to begin with. You know that." But the judge heard, "Excuse me, Ms. Romy Marin, you'll refrain from making commentary in my courtroom." Romy flushed, but didn't apologize. Of course not. Then the next witness was called. Mr. Dennison, the retired neighbor from 2 houses down, walked to the front. He moved slowly, his cane tapping with each step. I hadn't seen him in years. He adjusted his glasses and looked directly at the judge. "I've known the Marin family 30 years. I watched Rowena grow up. I was there the night they loaded the truck. I heard Romy say, exact words, 'The stupid little sister won't even know she's been erased.' Oh, so." He opened a folder. "And this," he said, "is a notarized summary of a will I kept because my late wife insisted we always keep a backup. It was signed by Jacob Marin, Rowena's grandfather. It names her as the sole beneficiary of the house and the trust, dated 3 months before he passed." There was an audible gasp. The judge reached for the copy, scanned it quickly, then turned to Romy and Micah. "Do you dispute this?" Micah's mouth opened, then closed. Romy stood up. "That will was never real. It wasn't valid." The judge frowned. "You'll sit down now, or I'll have you removed." She sat. Hard. Then the verdict came, calm, deliberate, and sharp. This court rules in favor of Ms. Rowena Marin. The will is hereby reinstated. All property transfers since the date of the fraudulent document are suspended pending further review. He looked at me. Additionally, this court appoints a forensic accountant to investigate the estate and family trust. Until the review is complete, control of the trust is provisionally granted to Ms. Marin for 90 days. The silence that followed was thunderous. Micah dropped his pen. Romy covered her face with both hands. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I simply nodded. Once, we recessed. As I walked toward the back hallway, I passed a side table filled with files from the trust's administrator. My lawyer handed me a folder. You're allowed to start reviewing these now. It's your name on the account. The hallway was quieter. Still. I sat on a bench near the far wall and opened the folder. Bank statements, business account records, and then something I hadn't expected. A loan application. Years old. Under my name. Taken out when I was 18. I squinted at the details. Business startup, $27,000. The name of the business? A shell company Romy once bragged about trying to launch, just for fun. And the social security number on the form? Mine. I froze. That explained the strange rejection I got when I tried to rent my first apartment out of high school. They told me my credit was a wreck, but I never understood why. I'd barely even used a card. Now I knew. Romy didn't just erase me from the will, she used me. Then buried the mess. I closed the folder. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Outside the courthouse, the air was crisp. Reporters leaned over barriers, shouting questions. I didn't stop, didn't speak. As I stepped down the marble stairs, a woman with a gray coat and soft eyes touched my elbow. You didn't deserve any of this, she said gently. I hope you burn them down. Gently. I met her gaze. So do I. Then I kept walking. But just before I reached the last step, I paused. Something pressed against the inside of my coat pocket. I reached in, pulled out a cream-colored envelope. The same one I found tucked behind the framed photo in the attic, the one with my name, written in my grandfather's hand. I opened it slowly. 4 words were written inside. Micah's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the envelope. The courthouse steps behind him had emptied out, but the weight of everything hung in the quiet like a fog. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just watched. He stared down at the message I'd left inside, lips parting slowly as he read aloud, more to himself than anyone else. I owed you nothing. The wind picked up, catching the edge of the paper. For a moment, it looked like he might let it go. But instead, he clenched it in his fist like it might rewrite history if he held on tightly enough. His mouth opened again, as if he had something to say. But nothing came out. And for the first time in my life, Micah looked lost, not angry, not smug, just hollow. Behind him, our mother stood stiffly, eyes locked on the back of his head. Her jaw was tight, but her hands, those hands that once brushed my hair back when I was little, shook with the kind of remorse that arrives far too late. She didn't speak either. Maybe she knew there wasn't anything she could say now that wouldn't crack under its own hypocrisy. I didn't wait for them to catch up or call after me. I walked away, my coat catching in the breeze, the last words I'd ever need to say already delivered. That afternoon, I drove in silence. No radio. No phone, just the hum of the engine and the curve of the road pulling me forward. The trees thickened as I neared the edge of the cemetery. Old oaks, leaning in like they remembered everything. I hadn't been here in over 10 years. The grass was freshly cut, the headstones neatly tended. I parked by the old stone bench, pulled the small envelope and photo from my bag, and walked to her grave. Grandma's name was etched in soft, weather-worn script. I knelt. I did it, I whispered. I held the line. There wasn't a tear, not one. I didn't feel empty either, just full in a quiet way like exhaling after holding your breath too long. I placed my college diploma photo against the flower vase, then tucked the letter I'd written behind it. I didn't read it again. Didn't need to. I knew what it said. She would have known too. On the way back to town, I took the long route, through the neighborhood where I'd grown up, past the old schoolyard, past the library where I used to sit for hours pretending to read while waiting for someone to pick me up. I stopped by the house last, or what used to be the house. It had sat empty for years after probate, falling into slow disrepair. But now it was mine again. Legally. Quietly. The front door was stripped and bare when I arrived, its paint long gone. I stood for a while, watching the sunlight hit the porch, then walked into the hardware store down the street and asked for one thing. Red, just like the one my grandma used. The clerk didn't ask questions, just nodded and rang it up. Later that weekend, I dipped the brush and took the first slow stroke across the wood. The color bloomed like memory. That night, I slept inside the house for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The floor creaked the same way it always had, but this time, the sound felt like mine. Over the next few weeks, I worked quietly. No grand announcements, no social media reveals, just step-by-step restoration. I fixed the kitchen tiles, replaced the cracked window in the back bedroom, cleared out the attic where I found an old shoebox full of black and white photos and half-written letters addressed to my Rosie. I kept them. And one morning, with sunlight pouring through the new curtains, I opened my laptop and clicked into the admin account for the community fund I'd launched. Figure It Out, that's what I'd named it. A fund for girls aging out of foster care, for the ones with no one left to call, no money, no backup plan. Just fear and silence. I didn't need my name on it. I didn't need anyone to know it came from me. But word spread anyway, quietly. Somehow the story I'd written, under a pseudonym, posted in pieces on an old forum for women survivors, had gone viral. I never mentioned names, never detailed the court case, just thoughts, memories, steps I took, things I learned, pain I carried and pain I let go. People read it. Some wrote back. One day I checked the donation dashboard and stared at the number. Tens of thousands. From strangers. One comment read simply, "We don't know who you are, but we're with you." And in the final post, I'd written something I hadn't realized I believed until I saw it typed out. Sometimes the loudest justice is silence. Weeks later, I received a letter. No return address, no name. Inside, a small card. 4 words, handwritten in block print. "We believe you now." I stood on the porch holding that card for a long time. Then I smiled. Just a little. I walked back inside, placed it gently into the fireproof box where I'd stored the original will, my court papers, and Grandma's last recipe card. Later that evening, I brewed some tea, wrapped myself in the quilt from the attic, and stepped outside. The porch light buzzed faintly, and the wind picked up through the trees lining the yard. The same trees I used to sit under, legs tucked in, back when I still hoped someone would come looking for me. No one had then. But I had found me now. They left me with a trash bag and a sentence. I returned it, not with anger, but with proof. They thought I'd break. But I learned to bend, then rise, and in the end, they had to watch me stand.